Go back to the shot put real quick.
Elena Bruckner. I think she just broke another record.
Yeah.
I think she just broke her own record on that toss.
You could just see the
oh my.
You could just see the flight and the arc that took. That was, you could just tell.
That was unbelievable.
The flight of that shot was just fantastic.
Everything that I've done within sport has all been centered around like this Olympic dream that I have. As far back as I can remember, when I was a little kid and people asked what I wanted to be when I grew up, I didn't say like doctor or dentist. I said I want to be an Olympian. My expectations for the environment that I was going to be in was very different than the environment it was. It was very easy to sort of fall into this chill, relaxed environment. And so I think in order to sort of compensate for that, I put even more pressure on myself because I was like, I have to fill this gap. I have to raise to the occasion. I don't know if I definitely started to doubt that I was capable of more, but I knew what I should have been capable of. And I was just stagnant. And that was like just added to the pressure that I had put on myself. And it just destroyed me. It's that childhood dream to go to the Olympics. But it's interesting because I have this balance of like, I'm actually so close to my dreams. How do I be competitive and chase it with everything I have without falling into that intense pressure trap? And also, like, what are you failing at? I think that's the question, is what is the thing that is going to be a failure or not a failure? And I think I'm scared to think about this, but as I'm getting ready to go to the Olympic trials, I could make the team, but I could also not make the team.
The Patina'd Podcast is about the earned wisdom found in pain. It's about chasing failure, catching it, and using that as an opportunity. It's about scar tissue and sinew. It's about stretch marks and dented fenders and refusing to hide them. It's about pushing our insecurities and shame to the forefront instead of behind us. Instead of seeing rust as something that compromises a structure's integrity, we choose to see it as the grit that builds character. This is the Patina'd Podcast. Okay, well, welcome to another episode of the Patina'd Podcast. Today, I'm very excited about our guest. I know podcasts always kind of say that stuff at the beginning to try to hype it, but I'm really excited about this guest, Elena Bruckner. Elena is not, like, to you, is that a common name for you? Like, do you have a bunch of friends or have been around and heard the name Elena often?
Not really, actually, especially the way it's spelled. So I'm usually the only Elena in the room.
So the reason I say that is my wife's name is Elena and it's spelled differently. And then my niece's name is Elena and it's spelled like yours. So
no way.
I'm like, yeah. So there's like this world of Elenas around me currently. Okay. And so as my son correctly pointed out before we started this, or as I was coming out to the gym here to shoot this, he's like, wow, you're really lucky to have her on. So yeah, I'm really excited about this. So Elena is one of the top women's discus throwers on the planet. And that's really cool to have such a top athlete on the show. And you've also competed for Team USA and Pan Am's in 2023. I kind of want to talk. I don't want the whole episode to be revolved around your athletic career, though. I want to kind of get into some of the mentality that helped you get to where you are today. And I want to talk about even some of the origin story as well. But yeah, you have competed for Team USA. So I guess I want to talk about that a little bit and even kind of what your endeavors are continuing forward now as a pro athlete in track and field and talk about that a little bit. So I'm excited to get talking to you, Elena.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the origin story because it's almost always like I was even talking to Mike McKnight, who just completed Cocodona 250 yesterday, and his episode's going to be coming on soon. But he was raised with very loving parents, supportive household, both parents married, all this stuff. But he still had this rising from the ashes story within that didn't happen within his parents' upbringing specifically and what they were raising him with, but more outside with friends and some of this trauma that happened. But there does seem to be something within the rising of the ashes component. It could be trauma from a mental health perspective, or it can just be like being raised in a way to have a certain mentality around work ethic or something. I don't know. But so I kind of want to talk about some of that. I'm interested in what that sort of origin story might be for you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think my story is probably similar to that athlete you're talking about, where my parents have always been so super supportive. I mean, my mom actually, I grew up going and being a spectator watching my mom compete in Ironman triathlons.
Mm.
And so I was always around like sort of a high intensity sports environment. My dad, not as much of the competitive athlete. He did do college football, but it was at Dr. Martin Luther College where they sort of got to beg some guys to join the team. So definitely not, Division One athlete, but still to this day, both my parents are big bike riders. And I grew up as one of three girls and in my family. So I was the middle of three sisters. And I think just always growing up around, like, my dad has always been such a positive male role model for me. And I mean, you could imagine what a guy has to go through in a house full of women,
Mm.
but it's
It's
just been amazing
terrifying.
the way, yeah. Yeah, he's handled it really well. But I mean, like, it's interesting because as I've grown in sports and moved along, and especially in college, sort of learning about the interactions that other athletes have with their parents in regards to their sport, I just like constantly feel so blessed to have the relationship with my parents that I do, because they they were not in my position when they were growing up. They're not trying to live vicariously through me. They're not putting that pressure on me. They've always just been supportive. And
Mm.
even when I, finished college and decided I wanted to keep competing, they really pushed me to do that. Even though, I mean, I'm sure we'll get to it, but I was not, you know, in the best situation within my sport after college. So
Mm.
they've always, they don't just hand stuff to me, but they're always there to support me and in the endeavors that I have. So yeah, they truly, wouldn't be where I am today without the support that they've given to me.
That's so interesting that you bring that up. During my first 100-mile run, there's a legend in the ultra running scene. His name is Ed Eddinghausen. There's many legends, right? But Ed Eddinghausen, he's the best athlete you've never heard of, right? Like he's completed all these. He's podiumed more ultra marathons than any human being alive. He's gotten first place more than any other alive. He's gotten second place, third place more than any other alive. He's ran more than any other alive and completed more than any other alive. All these sorts of like crazy longevity feats. And that was a question I was asking for him. I'm like, how is that for your kids? Because I want to know as a father, I want to know, like, is me going and do something crazy? Like, my hope is, as a father anyway, is that if I go and I do something that seems impossible and I can normalize impossibility to my kids, like feats that other people would consider impossible,
Yeah.
then what does that look like for them and their mentality growing up? And for triathletes and Ironman stuff, you know, 99.8% of the planet is going to look at those athletes and be like, that's impossible. There's no way. And so for you to be able to kind of be raised in that, that's interesting. So how did that kind of shape some of your idea in terms of self-belief and what is possible?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it was not only seeing my mom do these like crazy amazing feats in these Ironmans, but also the training that goes into that, and seeing her dedication and training and how she balanced, being a mom of three kids, but also putting in the intense training needed. Even growing up, like there was a time period where my family lived on a lake. And so my mom would get to do her open water swims out on the lake. And I'd
Mm.
always be the kid selected to go out on the kayak with her. And so and whenever she would go for a run, she would ask one of my sisters or I, who wants to go out on their bike with me when I go on my run? And so it just, like, we were always really involved in that training and got to see the work it took. But even when going into these competitions, like she always wanted to make the world championships in Hawaii. And, so she's a very competitive person, but I never saw her as this like cutthroat competitive athlete. It was always, she still was my mom. And so I think it was like, oh yeah, I'm doing all these crazy, amazing things, but I'm just a normal person. Like it's always back to like her identity and entire personality was not this intense competitiveness. And I think that really has shaped subconsciously, because I don't think I recognized it was happening as I was growing up, but I think that probably did shape a lot of who I am as an athlete today. Like I have been successful and been competing at the highest level, not just in track and field, but I got like fourth place at nationals in rock climbing. I went to
Oh,
nationals
wow.
for show ski water skiing. I went to nationals for volleyball. Like I have done a lot of sports at very, very high levels. And I'm one of those people that can just like pick things up and be pretty good. But I have always, it's always been, but I'm just a normal person. I have fun when I do this. I do well when I do this, but it's not the core of who I am. And I think a lot of that, when I can channel that, allows me to be like healthy mentally in these sports at these high levels, but
Mhm.
also just like definitely comes a lot from her in the way that she sort of intertwined her eliteness into just regular life.
I just wanted to take a quick pause and genuinely thank you for getting this far through the episode. This podcast is very small if you haven't noticed, so every like, every comment, every follow or subscribe, it really makes a difference. So my only request from you is to interact with the content if you like it. Like and follow, rate and review, and share if you feel like this is something that's worthy of sharing. Thank you so much. And along that same theme as like what helped you kind of attain some of the self-belief, there's a quote that you have that I wrote down. It says, "You have to believe in yourself. You have to believe that you can do it." Now, how does one find their potential? Like, how does
Yeah.
one go from just believing in themselves enough to be able to lean into potential?
Yeah, I love that. I like one of my favorite things is helping people recognize their potential and like hyping them up, encouraging them up to actually like give it a shot. Cause I
Mhm.
think there's so many people out there that have these woulda, shoulda, couldas that, they're like, "Oh, well, that would be cool, but that's I'm not gonna do that. That's not gonna be me." And I think it's easier for me to look externally to other people and say, "You can do that. You've totally got that," than maybe it is for myself. But I think when I think of finding that potential, I think a lot of it too is in order to go from potential to achievement, I think in order to do that successfully, you kind of need some passion in there too,
Mhm.
because there has to be the desire. Like, I think that there's things in life that I'm like, oh, I could be good at that. But just because you could be good doesn't mean that you're going to feel any sort of fulfillment when finding success in that area. And I think a lot of
Such
people
a good
maybe see
point.
this. Yeah, and I think a lot of people see it with like with their careers, with work too. And I mean, I even fell into this when I was in college and like trying to find my major. I had done really really well in math in high school. And I said, "Well, math comes easy. So, I guess I should be a math major." There is zero passion in me about having any job having to do with math. That is not anything I want to do, but I sort of fell into that trap of like, I have this potential. I guess this is where I should go.
Yeah.
But you in order to actually like find enjoyment and fulfillment in where you're going, like it's finding that perfect like harmony of potential and passion, because that's really where you're going to find the most success, I think.
I love that because as we're talking about potential, so we're talking about the beginning stages of
Yeah.
development in an area, right, or a particular domain. So I think there's something to this would be later on, but this would be like way after there's a development of
Mhm.
consistency, a development of foundation and all this stuff. There's something to, and this might just be a totally different point that I'm bringing up, but there's something to doing something hard that you don't have passion for. You have passion for the hard, but you don't have passion for the particular thing.
Yeah.
And I bring that up because I hate running. I can't stand it. I hate it, but I do it. And I do ultras now, which is something like, I never thought I would be a runner because I have bad knees.
Yeah.
And like, there's no passion to be an ultra runner.
Yeah.
But what I get in the process of doing something that I can't stand, and I push myself in it on a regular basis, like, not to be masochistic, but to build my resilience up in areas that, because it does correlate into other things that I feel like I can't do or don't want to do, but I'm going to do them anyway. And I'm going to put my best foot forward. It correlates into that too. So that would be maybe this years later sort of progression of doing something that maybe you don't have passion for, but it will kind of produce, I don't know, resilience or whatever you want to say.
Yeah. There, and even if it is passion for, like you said, like not the running, but what you're doing, ultimately it's not as much about the running, but it's about like proving to yourself that you can do hard things.
Yeah.
And like, that's what you have the passion for. Cause
Yeah.
without some sort of, I think like passion involved, like it's hard to do it. It's like, why am I doing this?
Yeah. 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 Which is often the reframe in my head as I'm doing it. All right. So let's talk about, because I know you had an incredible storied high school career in terms of several different track and field categories. And then you kind of go on the national spotlight scene and get recognized and all of that. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, like that was what I want to be when I grow up. And so I did every single sport when I was growing up. And I think a lot of it was this like part of me just seeking to find like, what's that sport? Like, what's it going to be for me? Because I knew I was talented, but it was a matter of like, I don't just want to be good. I want to be the best. And as I was sort of transitioning from like middle school to high school, I could no longer do like 8 sports within a year. And so kind of honed it down to the ones that I liked the best, but also I was the most successful in, which was volleyball and track and field. And for a while, like I thought, oh, volleyball, there's a clear path here to competing in college, that's what I'm going to pursue. But as I was looking to do volleyball in college, like it was an uphill battle. And there was also like no thought in my head that I was ever going to make an Olympic team for volleyball. My goal sort of shrunk down to like, oh, well, competing in college would be awesome. That would be a big win. But all of a sudden, I think it was kind of like my sophomore, junior year of high school. I had a high school coach that said, Elena, you can be really good at this. And I said, yeah, I know. I'm already good at this. I know I could be good. Great. I'm like, knowing myself, I'm like, I could be good at anything I do. Like, just that's how it kind of always is. Like, I'm not going to be the best at everything I do, but I'm going to be pretty good at anything I do. And so, he kept on saying, no, Elena, you could be really, really good. You could be really good. And from the beginning, he's like, you should stop playing volleyball, which I wasn't going to do. And I didn't stop until my senior year. But he kept saying, you could be really good. You need to take this seriously. So little by little, I started sort of shifting efforts towards track and field. And it was my junior year that I also got to start working with a Olympic shot putter named Greg Tafralis. And I absolutely love that you brought up this idea of having to believe in yourself, because Greg had the biggest impact on who I am as a person within sports and believing in myself. Because he taught me awesome technical things. Like he taught me a lot of like throwing specific stuff. But the biggest thing that Greg instilled into me was that need and necessity of believing in yourself, because you are going to go through like so many different times in your life, so many ways. You're going to be around so many people. And even when you're the best of the best, like, I mean, you can even look at, someone like Simone Biles at the top of the world. And she has one time where she's gets the yips and all of a sudden people are talking all this crap on her. You could be the
Mhm.
best in the world and there's still going to be people that don't believe in you. So you
Mhm.
have to be driven by that belief in yourself, because that's really what's going to carry you. And if you don't believe in yourself, how can you expect others to? So I think that like that was the biggest thing that he put into my heart and my involvement in the sport. Like I said, it was like my junior year of high school. And that's really when I started to excel. And I think it was my junior year that I was for the first time #1 in the nation in discus in high school. And, even then had plenty of people writing, newspaper articles like, oh, that was a fluke. That throw was a
Mm.
one-time thing. That it was an accident, which I don't know how you accidentally throw far. But apparently
Oops.
it was that. Yep.
A
Oops.
really good wind gust. Really good wind
Yeah.
gust that day.
Which is funny because that happens quite often in discus. But mine was not thanks to wind. But I think it was that junior year that I was like, oh crap, I am really good at this. I could actually like I am way better in track than I am in volleyball. And very quickly I sort of changed my mindset. I said there was like maybe a month where I was like, oh, maybe I'll be a dual sport athlete in college. And I very quickly realized that my college level for volleyball was very different than my college level for track. And so I went all in on track, started going through the recruiting process and, really had like my choice of schools, which, sometimes I wish I didn't, because when you have that many choices, it's a lot to try to figure it out. But, ended up picking the University of Texas and then had my senior year of high school, threw even further. I threw the California state record in the shot put and ended up #1 in the nation again for discus by about 10 feet. And
Wow.
had the #4 at the time, the #4 all-time high school women discus throw mark. Won the U20 nationals. I went to the Olympic trials as a high schooler to compete in the discus. I was the only high schooler competing in the throws, and I
Wow.
made the U20 worlds team for the US. So that was my first time competing on a US team. And I mean, I was feeling on top of the world. Like I was just could not wait for college, could not wait to actually like only be doing track and have all the support I need, and was really ready to just continue to excel. So, I mean, high school was awesome and really set me up well. But yeah.
Who was the like, I don't know if it's your first time going to the trials or if it was, second or third or whatever, but or if it happened in between there at some point, but who was the like, holy cow, that's so and so moment? Like who was the person that you saw and you're like, "Oh my gosh, like who is it?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it actually was at the trials, and it wasn't a discus thrower, or I guess he does throw discus. But I had walked out onto the field on like the practice day before the trials started, and I was walking off. I saw the Texas head coach with one of his professional athletes, Trey Hardy, who is a Olympic decathlete. And Trey,
Mhm.
like the decathletes are always like, they
Studs.
get, yeah, they're studs. They get like amazing coverage, like you know who they are. And Trey Hardy was like the top of the world
Mm.
in the top of track and field right then and there. And I saw him and I was like, you're kidding, that's Trey Hardy. And then because I had committed to the University of Texas, the head coach Mario, he said, Elena, come over here. And Trey says to me, hi, Elena, I'm so excited to meet you. Craziest experience of my life, because I was like gobsmacked that I was seeing him, and then he was introducing himself to me, and I was like, it was just the coolest thing. And we ended up getting to train a little bit at Texas my first year there while he was sort of on his way out of the sport, moving towards retirement. But like that was the craziest experience for me, that I was like, I'm at the US Olympic trials. Trey Hardy is right in front of me. He knows my name and he's introducing himself to me. Insane.
Yeah. Nice. That's amazing. So then you get into college, and I know you had already kind of prepped us a little bit for this, but yeah, you want to talk about that experience?
Yeah, I mean, college was great. Well, with an asterisk. It was great. Like I loved being in Austin. I met so many amazing people, but as you can imagine, coming off of the storied success of my high school career, I had a lot of expectations. I was really excited and ready to do big, amazing things. And when I got to Texas, like the track and field program at Texas had a very successful history, but it was kind of in a lull when I got there. And so my expectations for the environment that I was going to be in was very different than the environment it was. It was very easy to sort of fall into this just like chill, relaxed environment. Like it there was a disconnect. And so I think in order to sort of compensate for that, I put even more pressure on myself because I was like, I have to fill this gap. I have to put this pressure. I have to raise the occasion. And it just destroyed me. Like, I think too, with the emergence of like Instagram, it made it so much easier to see how other people were progressing and to see all of those people that I was ahead of in high school go off to college as well and excel, go to nationals, be all American, make these teams. And I was just stagnant. I was stagnant, not really going anywhere. And that was like just added to the pressure that I had put on myself. And so that was really, really difficult. And then, I mean, that was hard enough on its own. But then our entire coaching staff got fired. We got a new coaching staff
Were you a
in.
freshman year or
I was a sophomore. So it was right after my
sophomore? Wow.
sophomore year. Yeah. So halfway-ish. I ended up taking 5 years, but about halfway through my college career, our entire coaching staff was let go and we brought in a new one. And the coach that was brought in was coming from University of Kentucky, which was like winning all the national championships back then. He was a heavy hitter head coach and brought in a lot of heavy hitter event coaches. And I was really excited about it. But I think the most difficult thing that happened is when they came in, it very much was a get on board or get off the train mentality. And there was no real transition of like building trust. It was just off the bat expected and demanded if you wanted to stay there. And my whole life, I've had a really difficult time with change. I've dealt with a lot of change in my life, but I always have a really hard time adjusting initially. And so to have everybody in my support system at Texas leave and all of these new people come in without wanting to build up any trust, it actually like fully sent me into a pretty intense depression that I didn't realize was depression. And like for the first probably 6 or 7 months of that new coaching sort of time period, I was really not in a good place. And I had asked some of my friends and teammates afterwards, like, did you realize that this was happening to me? Because I'm generally like a very bubbly, like happy person. And I was not. So like, and I think looking back, like, I mean, I had friends that say, oh yeah, like you just didn't seem like yourself. But I just wish that I would have known that's what was happening in the moment. Cause I think it was really, really difficult to get through that. And then on the other end, I was just so exhausted that I was like, okay, well, I guess we're just trusting all of these people and this is where we are. And in order to survive, I got to get on board. So I think a lot of that felt like my body and mind was sort of fighting the new situation. And then in order to survive, I just was like, I just have to like submit to the new regime.
And so how did that process go of submitting to the new regime? And I'm also interested in conjunction with that is this pressure that you're putting on yourself. Did that, sounds like it didn't seem to help. Yeah. So how was that for you just trying to land on your feet?
Yeah. I think once I decided to sort of, hop on the train per se, it did seem exciting. Like it seemed I was excited for where the team was heading. I was excited to have coaches that, had very high expectations of us initially. And I was like, okay, like let's go do some damage. Let's do big things here. And I was excited to be a part of that. And once I had sort of gotten on my feet in that sense, I very quickly got very injured and ended up spending pretty much the entire track season in a boot on a knee scooter because I had gotten some stress injuries in the bones in my foot and leg on my right leg. So, I was kind of beaten down emotionally and then was like, okay, I'm on my feet. Let's do this. And then beaten down physically. And that, came with its own challenges. And it was interesting to see too how like the mentality of the new coaching staff sort of had seeped into me in the way that I dealt with that injury. Cause I think I probably came back from that injury a lot too quickly. And then it happened again the next year.
Oh. And ironically, we heard a crash happen as you said that. It was
yes. I talk with my hands and happen to knock something over. But
that's all right. So you felt like because of the mentality was get on your feet, let's go, you're fine, push yourself, that caused further injury and just prolonged things?
Yeah. I mean, I think it was interesting because like mentally I was in it, but yeah, physically my body was not doing well. There was something up with however we were training that just I ended up getting the same injury, the same stress reactions in my foot 3 years in a row, right around the same time within the season. And so it was really hard for me once I even got to season to be able to really compete at the level that I wanted to. And it was kind of that continuous, like, just, it needs to happen right now. We need to do this versus thinking about longevity and overall health of the athlete.
Sure. Which I think would be like a stereotype of a high school or college bad programming, right? Is like, I don't care what you're going to do with the rest of your life. I need you to win now.
Yeah.
Right. But okay. So now were these injuries specific to the type of training you were doing? You haven't had them since, or?
Yeah. I thankfully I've since graduating college, I haven't had these injuries come up again, which is amazing. I mean, praise God, because if I was put on a knee scooter today, it'd be really difficult to come back off. But I think a lot of what you're doing in throwing is repetitive movements over and over and over again. And the shoe that you wear is like super thin rubber, no cushioning. And so if you're doing these and you're on cement, so if you're doing these movements just a little bit in a way your body doesn't like over and over and over again, that's where those stress injuries come in, which is just, I mean, I know that comes up a lot in the running. So it was interesting because I almost was getting these like distance runner injuries as a thrower.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's hard. And the system around you, your parents or other support system around you, they're also seeing this person with massive amounts of potential. That seems like in terms of success within the sport is at your fingertips. And then now you're struggling to match what you were doing in high school. Was there any talk of transfer? Was there any talk of anything like that? Just stopping, maybe it's not for you?
Yeah. I mean, thankfully, like they never put that idea of stopping into my head. Like that wasn't something they were sort of putting out there. But this is where sort of the downfall of the way that I've interacted with my parents within sport comes into play. Like I'm very happy with the balance that we have of the support they give me. But then I could sit here and be like, wow, I was not doing well. Maybe I wish they would have sort of pushed me and been like, hey, like you're better than this. You should go somewhere else, because I don't think we ever really even had conversations about anything like that. They were just kind of, whether I did good, whether I did bad, they were supporting me. And, when I got injured, it sucked, but they were like, oh, you're going to get through this. And then, you've got this. It was never any like serious sit down of, hey, like you can be better than this. You can do more than this. Let's go make that happen.
Hmm. Coaching styles, they vary depending on the athlete, right?
Yeah,
Like as a coach, I
totally.
think you got to be pretty flexible and depend on like the person that you're working with or the person you're coaching. What coaching style would have helped you been more successful during that period of time?
Yeah, I think it would have been helpful to have a coach that I think was able to be a little bit more flexible to the athlete. I think my coach at the time was pretty controlling, and that was not super helpful to me. And I think too, it's like a lot of times it felt like they were trying to sort of copy and paste the success they had found from one athlete onto
Mm,
me, even if that athlete and I were two very different people. So I think having a coach that maybe was a bit more flexible in the way that they were training their athletes, I think could have helped me. And somebody with a little bit more EQ, because
mm,
I'm a very, very emotionally led, driven person. And I think anytime I brought that emotional side to me in sport, it was met with sort of awkwardness,
mm,
or like just disengagement. And I needed somebody that could listen and engage with me in that way because it's so core to who I am and how I operate. And so I think that's something that was missing was, yeah, just somebody that could be with me in that part of who I am.
mhm. And during this time period, are you still having success enough to continue within going to Olympic trials, or like are you just kind of falling off the face of the planet in terms of in terms of the headlines for the sport itself? Like what was going
Yeah.
on for you?
I definitely was kind of falling off the headlines, but
Mm,
I mean, I was still my bad was still good enough to always be competing at conference. I always made regionals, which was like the qualifier for nationals. But I only in my main event discus, I only made nationals once in my entire collegiate career, and I
mm,
only got a PR. I only threw a new personal record one time in my entire 5-year collegiate career, which is not great. I was used to PRing a couple of times a year back in high school, which is typical. You know, you don't PR that much in college, but to only PR one time in all of college, that was tough. That was
mhm,
really tough. And it took a lot of resilience because I think I knew what I should have been capable of. I don't know if I definitely started to doubt that I was capable of more, but I knew what I should have been capable of. But yeah, I mean, I definitely was not somebody that they were, if I even when I made nationals, I didn't make the final. And thankfully though I did do just enough to make the Olympic trials my senior year, my last year, but it was like tooth and nail. I was real nervous and I wasn't sure I was going to get in. So,
mm.
I did make it and that felt like a win, but I wasn't really any better off than I was the last time that I was there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, no growth, maybe even some regression. So that leads to this question that I had, pushing past plateaus or having like a mental slump. I guess your story is going to kind of help paint this picture a little bit, but I would love to get some of your insight on that is because here we are, it sounds like within the narrative of the story, there's some regression, at best plateau going on, like other than
Mhm.
one moment of a PR. But as you said, for you, that's not it wasn't good enough according to your
Yeah.
talents or your capabilities. So if there's a plateau or a mental slump, something like that, then what is the insight you have towards that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of like once I decided to go compete post collegiately, I sort of went off on my own. And even that first year, I was a lot happier, but I was still in that same slump performance wise. I moved back home to California. I got a new coach. We gel really well. He's been really supportive. I really love him. But that first year, I felt like things were so much better, but my performance still wasn't there. And I think the biggest thing, obviously, last year was my second year post-collegiate and was, really a big breakout year for me. But what really got me past that slump to break out of that was coming back to the core of why I'm doing this sport and trying to get rid of all of that intense pressure I put on myself, because I still did that. I got away from that toxic college situation. I got back home. I had an awesome coach. I had awesome training partners. I thought I was loving the sport again, and it still wasn't going anywhere. And I had to, I was still putting a ton of pressure on myself, even that first year out. And so the biggest switch for me was really coming into this position of gratitude. And once I was able to switch into that and recognize that, what is this really about? Is this really all of it is going into these meets and just saying, I am so grateful that I am healthy, because there was times when I wasn't healthy. I'm so grateful that I have a coach that supports me and partners with me instead of controls me, because that's where I was. And so a lot of it was recognizing these things, even little things, I'm so grateful that I get to wear whatever the heck I want to wear, because when you're in college, you basically have a dress code, you have uniforms, and just the way my personality is, it's that, confining to certain patterns just doesn't fit who I am. And so when I was able to sort of reframe everything and just be the results do not matter, because I am loving what I'm doing, and I am so grateful that I get to be in this community and I'm still doing what I love. That is really what freed me from this jail of the pressure that I was putting on myself. And instantly, I don't think the difference in performance between my first year out of college and my second year out of college, I don't think that difference in performance was a reflection only of the training that we did and the actual technical improvements. I'd say maybe 25% of it was technical improvements. The rest of that 75% was the mental side of being able to free myself from all of that pressure that I was, for whatever reason, putting on myself.
And you were able to free yourself through gratitude, it sounds like.
Yeah.
So that's huge insight. One of the things, and I'm a therapist, and one of the things I work with my clients on is I talk about the happiness fallacy. And essentially the point is that happiness is something that is outside of your control.
Yeah.
And when it comes, great. But you trying to force happiness is kind of it's at the core of many human issues, especially with addiction, which is my world. In order to force the feeling that's outside of your control, you can only do it by pushing a cheat code. In my case, or the world that I work in, would be with substances.
Yeah.
But gratitude, though, on the other hand, is something that's within your control. You can force it. You can do it on a daily basis. And by doing it, that creates joy, which is something that's sustainable and a symptom of something that you've done, which is gratitude, right?
Yeah. And, I don't even know I don't remember if it was somebody who told me to practice that or I just started doing it, but it is funny because it's that forced thing. It's not, I go into every meet naturally feeling so grateful for everything. Sometimes it's in a panic or when I'm feeling down, and it's almost annoying to be I'm so grateful I'm not injured. And it's but if you tell yourself those things and you can force it and it can pull you out of that, and really it is cool. Cause happiness is not within your control, but you can absolutely find things that you can be grateful for. And that can just shift so much of that mindset, which is such a huge part of what I do.
Yeah. I think what makes gratitude something that you can achieve as well, dependent, even when you're in a pretty low state, is like the thing that you're using comparison against is typically your own experience of an earlier time that was dreadful to you, right? So if the gratitude that you're stating is like based off of injuries, which you know what that feels like to go through a period of 3
Yeah.
years in a row of injury after injury or same injury after same injury after same injury, then yeah, you can definitely use that as like a spigot or a source to just, let me open this up and pour some gratitude into this for right now.
Yeah. Even when you're at your lowest and you don't feel like you have a lower version of you to compare yourself to, there's still little things that you can pull out. And I mean, even just like, we all have people in our lives that have been, touched by things like cancer or chronic disease or horrible injuries or death. And like, we can still pull from that to understand, not necessarily just to have this comparison, but to be, wow, I truly do always have so much to be grateful for. Even if it's like the tiniest thing, like, I woke up today being able to breathe without, my nose being swollen from allergies or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, there's another type of comparison, like it's within comparison theory that is like, so one is the comparing to yourself. Then there's another one,
Yeah.
which is comparing to others. A helpful way of doing comparison of others, like comparing yourself to the homeless person on the corner doesn't work very well. It
Yeah.
might, depending on, I guess, maybe, I don't know, maybe how narcissistic you might be at the time, but comparing yourself to others in terms of like up one rung of the ladder where you are at, like they're right there, it's reachable and it feels
Yeah.
tangible. You're like, man, if I maybe tweak this, then I can kind of get there.
Right.
Then
Yeah.
that can uplift you too, because it gives you a vision and a place and a direction where to go and someone to
Yeah.
look up to kind of get there. So that's helpful too. Yeah. Okay. So as you had mentioned, you're now professional athlete, which is really cool. But how does that look like from the day to day being a pro athlete, a pro track and field athlete? Like, what does that look like? Because it's not LeBron James on his summers.
Yeah.
So what does that look like for you?
Yeah, it certainly is not, the MLB or, NBA, NHL. It's not one of those sports. I also have a full-time job working in tech sales, and a lot of the money that I get from track and field is grant money. Thankfully, there's been some groups that get together and recognize that track and field does not pay the bills and they want to support athletes as they're on their journey. Because honestly, kind of anybody can I mean, I'll say anybody can go pro. Anybody can continue to compete post collegiately in track and field if they want to. You can't just enter into the NBA, but you in track and field, there are opportunities to compete at whatever level you want to after you're done with college. And so it's a matter of, okay, well, how do I actually, you know, get paid? And that's when you could call it professional. It's interesting because there's kind of this spectrum. And like my first year, even though I wasn't doing so great, I did make some money. I applied for some grants. I got some grants. I had one track meet where, there was some prize money. I got second place. I got some money, got to give some money to my coach. And I was like, so am I professional now? I don't like what is that, And so I was like, I'm more than just an amateur. This is more than a hobby, but this is not my job. So it is interesting. And like this past year, I got significantly more grant money. I made a lot more prize money, but I still I do live in the Bay Area. It is very, very expensive. So I could be the best of the best. I have people I train with who are the best of the best in the world in their event, and they still have to have another job. But for me, even if I was living in, the cheapest part of the United States, I would still have to have some sort of other job. Maybe not full time, but being in the Bay right now, I definitely still need a good paying, high paying job in tech full time in order to be able to still train. So for me, three out of the 5 work days, I also train. And my training days, I usually head out from work around 3:30 p.m. get to the track, throw for about 2 hours, and then head over to the YMCA and do my lift, which is maybe an hour and a half. So all in, I train, and then I train one day on the weekend. So I'm usually training, 16 to 20 hours a week on top of a full-time job. So it's a lot. But on the bright side, like my first year out of college, I lived at home above my parents' garage, and I had a pretty hefty commute to get to the track where my coach is. So I wasn't able to have a job. I was traveling like 2 hours each way, 4 days a week. So I was just training, and that also fed into a lot of that pressure on myself.
Mm.
Like when that is all you're doing, it was not healthy for me. So, in order to get money, but also to take my, sort of diversify what my brain is focusing on, I got the jobs so that I could, live closer to where I'm training, be able to afford
Mm.
to live. But it's been helpful not only for, funding my track dreams, but also for my mental health. Having,
Mhm.
I'm like, okay, I know I'm supporting myself. I'm taking care of myself with my job. And now track really can just be that thing that I'm grateful for. I love, I enjoy. And I'm at a point now where I am getting to make a little bit of some extra savings from it, which is more than I could have ever asked for.
Mm. Yeah, that's really cool. It makes me kind of think there's an ultra runner, Jake Jackson. He runs for Team USA Ultra, but he's also a full-time UPS driver. Like that's
Yeah.
his gig, right? Like that's what funds his running. And he just finished, I think yesterday he finished Cocodona 250, or today, maybe it was this morning, but 250 miles, which is
Yeah. It's been all
amazing.
over my Instagram.
Yeah.
So when you mentioned
Oh
it
yeah.
earlier, I was like, I know that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's a big event. So is it still that if you're getting paid as an athlete, you can't go into the Olympics? Is that still a thing, or
No, no,
or
no, no.
is Paris still an option for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's no restrictions around professional or amateur status with
Mm,
the Olympics. I think there was, gosh, it was maybe 2 Olympics ago, there was a bit of a, every once in a while there's a bit of a tizzy around collegiate athletes accepting
mm,
prize money. So
mm,
that's the thing, is that when you're in college, if you want to, like, if your country pays you for getting a medal at the Olympics and you accept that money, you can't go back to college. But
mm.
within the Olympics, somebody like LeBron James could go compete on Team USA in the Olympics if he
Yep.
wanted to. So, yeah, I mean, absolutely. Paris is 100% what I'm aiming for. I mean, it's that childhood dream to go to the Olympics. So, but it's interesting because I have this balance of like actually so close to my dreams. How do I, you know, be competitive and chase it with everything I have without falling into that intense pressure trap that I've put before.
Mhm.
So that's sort of where I'm at right now with that mindset journey, is figuring out, because I think last year I made the world championships and I got there and I felt like I was missing that competitive spirit that I used to have in high school. So I had almost gone too far into the casual, which was really helpful for me. It obviously worked. I had a really good season. But then when it came time to compete, I was lacking that competitive spirit. But if I'm too competitive the whole time, I lack the love of the sport and I'm, so intensely putting pressure on myself that I don't perform well. So it's kind of, I'm in that middle space where I'm trying to find that balance right now.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So then I can't ask you how to do it then, because you're still in the process of figuring it
Yes.
out yourself.
Yes, I think
Okay.
in my mind, if this is super competitive and this is just having fun, I think it's gonna be closer to the just having fun, but
Mm.
I do still need a little sprinkle of that competitiveness.
Yeah, cool. It seems like when when you're like, well, there's two things that's happening in high school. One is like you're a dry sponge, right? So every
Yeah,
new thing that your body is learning and technique and all the little things, like it's so adaptable, and your brain is at that age is firing off so crazy. Everything that you're learning is like warp speed. So it can also be insanely fun at that time too. But
yeah,
also there's trying to carry that over into the current, like how can I have as much fun as I was having back in high school, and just being like, you know, almost having this mentality of let's see how far I can go, because I can go as far as anybody else. Why not?
Yeah.
And yeah, trying to carry that over. Yeah, I'm interested to see how that plays out for you.
Yeah. It has been really fun because I feel like since college, I'm just trying to revert back to high school Elena because I was successful and I was having a blast. And so thankfully, my coach now sort of knew me a little bit in high school and he was familiar with me as an athlete in high school. So, and he shared that perspective with me of like, yeah, like you were good, you have something. Let's get back to that like core of who you are, because that's where you're going to find success. So these past 2.5 years that I've been with this new coach has really been a lot of like breaking down whatever happened in college and trying to get back to that, revert back to that excitement, enjoyment, that you find as a high school athlete where you're, learning new things and you're failing big time, but it's like leading to these big wins and just the enjoyment and excitement of it all. And, what caused me to fall in love with the sport in the first place.
Do you ever do posts, whether it's a post on Instagram or any other, I guess, social media thing, or even if it's just like around with text and personal text threads or whatever, but do you ever post failures that you have? And then what is the response typically?
Yeah, every once in a while. So I record pretty much all of my practice throws. I have because of work, sometimes I'm training when my coach isn't there. So it's helpful because I can view my stuff and I can share it with him. So I see the good, bad, and the ugly recorded. Most of the time I'm posting the good stuff, but every once in a while, especially if it's like an actual flop where either I'm falling on the ground or the discus is going all sorts of ways, I'll post that too. And it's funny because I think in my mind, I'm like, oh yeah, like this is Instagram. Of course I'm posting the best. Like, of course I have failures. I'm just not showing them. But I think like for the people that are like my true followers are really engaged with me, they love it. They're like, oh, this is awesome. Like you fail too. You're human. It makes them feel closer to where I am, But then I also get some trolls that are like, this is horrible. I could throw so much further. Like, I can't believe you think you're good. And I'm like, did you read the caption? Like, this is a flop, and it's still probably farther than you would ever throw. Just saying. Yeah. But yeah.
Yeah. The guy, and I'm going to use that gender specific thing because it's probably almost always a guy that's saying I could probably throw as good. Like the I could probably guy, that guy sucks. That guy sucks. Yeah. That guy is watching UFC fights and saying I could probably take that guy. Same guy. Yeah.
There was one video that I posted that got significantly more views than my normal videos and tons of comments. But one of the comments was a guy who said, you probably didn't think that somebody who's done this before would watch this. Here's all the things you're doing wrong. And it's like an older man. And I'm like, I just finished competing at the World Championships. And it was so funny because I do have some people that, come to bat for me and in the comments are like, she's this, why are you're so like, you don't know anything. Like she would kick your butt, all this stuff. But it's like, it really is crazy how, nonchalant people will be, I'll say nonchalant behind a keyboard. So
yeah, nonchalant is a nice way of putting it. Yeah, I bet it is. I don't know. I suppose maybe there's women out there, but it feels like such a loser guy trait, like competitive loser guy trait to do something like that. So yeah. With the same heart as my friends over at the Golden Hour Adventures podcast, I wanted to do an unsolicited, unsponsored plug for a company that recently did me good. Last summer, I was out on a really long run and I was deep into the run. I had brought what I thought was plenty of water, And I go into the back of my running pack and I realize I don't have any water left. It was actually probably the scariest moment that I've had on a long run, where I am running, I'm at least 12 miles out from my destination, and I'm running low on water and I'm already dehydrated. I was thinking, what am I going to do? I was really thinking in drastic measures. Do I need to call for help? And I'm not one to call for emergency service help. That would be very embarrassing. So I was really thinking about, what am I supposed to do? Eventually, about 2 miles away from my destination, I was extremely dehydrated. I ran into a couple of ladies and I begged them for some of their water. And they were nice enough to give some weird male stranger running upon them fast, asking for water, some water, and I am very appreciative of them for it. I didn't care. I just drank their water. I didn't care if they had the flu or whatever. I needed some water. And it was that day that I decided, okay, I'm done. I need to bring a life straw with me. So if you're not aware of life straw is something that you can take out with you. And if there is some body of water, preferably a running body of water, you can directly from a stream drink from it and it will filter out the contaminants and you can drink clean water straight from the stream. I haven't had that extreme of a situation since, but there has been once or twice where, again, I didn't bring enough water with me. I happened to have my life straw with me and I drank from it, and that was helpful for me. And even just knowing that it's with me on my back, I happen to have the water bladder one. Just knowing that I have it with me just is extremely beneficial and gives me confidence to know I can keep going out and know that I have something with me in case of an emergency. Here's the reason why I'm plugging this. In my last ultra, the top unscrewed from it and I lost the bladder part of my life straw. It fell off and I lost it. And it's not cheap. It's like $30 or something. I don't know. But anyway, so because I'm cheap and I didn't want to pay for a brand new one, I reached out to Life Straw and I said, hey guys, I lost it. I said, is there any way you guys can send me back another one? And they did. They didn't ask for this promotion. I mean, my show is going to get like 5 views anyway, but I just wanted to put this out there for anybody who's out there hiking or getting into hiking. Have that confidence with you that if you happen to run out of water, you can have something like Life Straw on you. That's highly beneficial. And again, they didn't ask for this plug. I just wanted to do it because they treated me good, man. They didn't say, F you lost it, buy another one. No, they just sent me another one for free based off of my email telling them, hey, I lost it. So anyway, I think that speaks highly of a company when they're able to do that, when they actually do care about people. I was able to send them an email directly and it went directly to a person, to a human being, not some automated thing. And they actually cared about it. And then they sent me one back for free. Anyway, that means a lot to me. So I wanted to plug them for free. There is no sponsorships on this show. I'm not big enough, but I still wanted to plug them. Thanks. I did this the other day because for the same reason you do it. I think so for my personal or my recovery based Instagram, which I just got on Instagram, I think like a year ago, but I was off of social media for like 8 years or something. But for that account, like I had put up, I think, so a lot of people see things that I put up and my fear is that if they're struggling, they're going to do the same thing that I did when I was struggling, which is think that the person of success is different. Like,
Yeah.
okay, so that person is just genetically gifted differently. That person they're different in some way. They have better opportunity, blah, 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 blah. And it's all like this. So, like when I'm 250 pounds, 90 pounds overweight, and I'm watching a 90-year-old grandma deadlift more than I could deadlift. I'm like, oh, well, in my head, in order to make that okay, I'm like, well, because she's blah, blah, and I got whatever fill in the blank excuse to make myself feel okay as I'm eating a slice of pizza. Anyway, so now I like one of my thing is chasing failure. I'm like, I have to make failure acceptable because it's necessary. Right. I have to make it acceptable because the only way for me to get better is through failure. And so I attempted to run 100 miles last week, and there's a myriad of reasons why I failed. And part of it was my mentality going into it. Part of it was that, like, just situationally, next time things that are pretty easy that I know I can change. Like, next time I'm going to drive myself, not be dropped off, because then I'm taking in my wife into account. Like, well, if I fall out midnight and she has to pick me up, I'm taking in all these outside factors that shouldn't be a factor. And then anyway, so long story short, I failed. And so I put it up on the Instagram. I say, I failed, I quit. And I just come to account with the way I failed. Right.
Yeah.
And I put up the inventory. Like, so if you click on it, you can read in more detail on it. And the people that were nice enough to read in it in the most honest, sympathetic, caring way were saying, you didn't fail. Like,
Yeah.
here's this, and like, you're still really good and you're still inspiring and blah, blah, blah. And I appreciate the sentiment, but don't take away what I earned, which was failure.
Yeah.
I earned it fair and square. I earned it. And to have that removed and taken away from me is somewhat insulting, because that also removes the experience of what I've gained from the failure, and so I wasn't sure if you've had any of that, where it's people with a nice, honest sentiment,
Yeah.
but also it can come off as a little bit placating, and that's not their point. That's not their point. That's
Right.
not why they're doing
Totally.
it. But for me personally, like, as being the person, like, I had to work really hard for it. It took months of training to earn that failure.
Yeah.
It took months of little wins and learning things in order to get to that peak, and then feel that failure hard. And then to have it massaged a little bit and say, no, it's not failure because of this. I'm like, no, it's failure. Let me have it, man. Don't take that away from me. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, interestingly enough, like, I don't think I don't operate the same. I'm definitely one of those people. Like, I can totally recognize what you're saying about how you're like, no, like, you're able to see the failure in the positive light.
Mm.
I can't. Like, it hits me to my core. But I think I think we're on the same vibe, but I frame it differently. I think, to me, when I have those failures, like, the win, like, yes, I failed, but I don't take pride in the failure. I take pride in the attempt and everything.
Yeah.
So it's similarly positioned. I think I'm just not in a place where I can be like, no, let me have the failure, because oh my gosh, like, I just can't sit with it. When I'm like, I failed, I am so, like, just embarrassed with myself that I frame it differently, where it's like, I can still accept, like, I fell short, I failed here, but, like, in order for me to be okay with it, I have to make sure that I come out on the other side with, like, these other wins. So I think it's like, the failure itself, I don't necessarily wear as the badge of honor, but what went into it. And then also, I am, like, such a huge fan of the redemption story and the underdog. And the more failures you have on your belt, the more of the underdog you are when you win. And, like, the more of rock bottom that you've been at, the more you have for that book, for that story of, like, how you came back from it and stuff. And so it's definitely, when I do experience failure, I always want to make sure that, like, if I am, and also, like, what are you failing at? I think that's the question, is, like, what is the thing that is going to be a failure or not a failure? And I think, like, I'm scared to think about this, but as I'm getting ready to go to the Olympic trials, I could make the team, but I could also not make the team. And I'm already, like, preemptively thinking about, what if I don't make the team? How am I going to view that? If I don't make the team, is that failure? And the way that I'm viewing it already, and, like, sort of training my brain to think about it, so that, because I don't want to go in thinking about failure. So the way that I'm viewing it now is, I want to go into the Olympic trials, the US Olympic trials, with all my boxes checked, so that if I take top 3, I'm qualified to go to the Olympics. That's one thing. I want to go in. I want to have a successful season leading up, and I want to do my best at the trials. And then whatever the outcome is, whether I make the team or not, I want to be proud of how I did. And so I could see that similarly to you. You know, there are times where like I've failed, you know, and the reason that I failed was because I didn't prepare. I didn't take it seriously. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. There's things that happen that lead to failure. And I don't want to feel that because that happens. And I'm like, that's my fault. Whereas if I'm doing everything in my power to try to have a successful outcome and I fall short, that's okay because I know that I did everything I could to give myself the best opportunity. So I think that's sort of my philosophy. I'm never going to at least to the best that I can, I'm never going to set myself up for failure to be an option. I might have a less than ideal outcome, but failure is something that I'm like, I'm not going to put myself in a position to achieve that. And so I think that's like, I know that's a lot of words, but hopefully that helps you understand sort of the way that I view like failure, because I think it's possible and I've experienced it, but like I do everything I can to avoid failure even being a potential outcome.
Yeah. And so that last thing you said, I think we're saying a lot of the same stuff. There's a little nuance there, but like you said, I think so because it'd be one. So there's two types of failure, right? Like there's the type of failure where you just don't even really try that hard. Yeah. And then you just expect it because there's this, maybe an entitlement there, or maybe you don't care enough or whatever, or maybe you just are avoidant of challenge in general. So there's that type of failure. And then there's the type of failure where you put a lot of yourself into it and the hope to succeed is so high.
Yeah.
And then that's the type of, because that's the stuff, when I say it's like almost like a badge, it's like, yes, because that's going to be the reason why I'm going to do the next one. Right. That's the reason why I'm currently like, okay, which one can I plan according to our schedule this summer? Like, can I fit this one in? Can I, that's the reason why I'm doing it. So it's not because I'm like, okay with failure in the sense of like, good, I failed. And no, like now I need to try to get that back almost like there's a sour taste there. I need to climb out of it,
We're on the same page. Yeah.
I think most people understand like for growth and resiliency, there has to be consistency. And I think you've even said that at the beginning of this interview. So then I want to even go to the more foundational level of that, or the previous stage of that. How does one stay consistent?
It's so hard. Mm-hmm. It is so stinking hard. And I mean, self-discipline. I think it was actually I'm not sure if you've heard the name Alexi Pappas before. Mm-hmm. She's a distance runner in the track and field. She's a distance runner and she has this book. She's also a movie producer, movie director, but her book is called Bravey. One of the best books I've ever read. I would recommend it to anybody who's watching this podcast. Bravey, Bravey. And
I wrote really gravy, like I wrote down gravy just now. So bravery.
Bravery.
Okay.
No, just Bravey. Bravey. Brave.
Okay.
With a Y at the end. Bravey.
Right.
It's amazing. But I believe it's a point at which in her book where she's talking about the amount of self-discipline that we have. And there's this idea that's not her idea. I think it comes from somewhere, but I remember her talking about it. But we have a limited amount of self-discipline and decision-making power throughout the day. Mm-hmm. With me, with the way that I operate, with work, with track, with, I have to eat. I have all of these things. I have so many decisions and I have to be so disciplined in so many areas of my life that I have to decide, where is this necessary? And then I have to recognize and be okay that it's probably going to slip and suffer in other ways. So when people, as a professional athlete, people ask me about my diet all the time. And I mean, it's nice that I'm a thrower, and just the way that I personally operate, my diet doesn't matter all that much. Like, it's really helpful. Like, I just need to make sure that I get enough protein. It's really helpful if I'm having a nice balanced diet, but ultimately, as long as I'm getting enough protein, my weight can fluctuate. Could I be a little bit lighter than I am right now? Sure. Do I know that it would help with my throwing? I have no clue. So I'm pretty okay with where I am. And so because of that, like, it takes a lot of discipline for me. If I'm going to be eating really healthy, that takes a lot of discipline. But you know what else requires a lot of discipline? Getting to the gym at the end of the day after I've worked 8 hours and then gone outside and thrown for 2 hours. Literally just walking into the gym takes a lot of discipline. And I need to go to the gym. I don't need to eat, the healthiest whole foods meal of my life. So I need to make sure that I'm allocating my self-discipline stores to these training things that require me to be consistent to see results. So every week, 4 days a week, I got to go throw and I got to go to the gym. And I think going to the gym is the hardest thing because when I go throw, my coach is there, my teammates are there. When I'm going to the gym, like I said, I go to the Y. It's a public gym. I show up, I do my workout that my coach wrote for me, and I go home. So actually getting myself to go to the gym, I could not show up and my coach wouldn't know. Or I could go to the gym and kind of do half of my workout and go home. No one would know. So that's where but I have to be consistent. So I think with consistency, that self-discipline is super important, and making sure that I'm allocating my self-discipline resources to those things where it really is important to have that consistency. I think that's because, consistency is really, really hard, and you have to be super, super disciplined. And so it's giving yourself that grace to not be disciplined in every area of your life, and making sure though that then you are being disciplined in the areas where it's most important.
Massive, huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. Dr. Andrew Huberman mentioned the studies, because there's like 2 studies. One that was proving the point that you were just making. Like there's there's basically there's a source, there's a limited source, and then another study disproved it, and then another study, and then the person of this study said, well, what about? And then they said, okay, we can concede too. So it's mostly true in most situations. And what you're talking about, there is I think, understanding that the well can grow larger in certain areas too. It's kind of depending on different factors. But anyway, so yeah, but I think it's in the word grace that you just used there, having the opportunity to offer yourself some grace so that you can flex according to the needs that are important to you. And then the grace also allows for forgiveness so you're not so rigid in this thinking pattern of like, but I was supposed to hit that many sets.
Right.
And even though time ran out and I needed to go over here and pick up my kid over here, I still I feel bad that I didn't finish my sets. And it's like, too rigid of a thinking. There's a good, it's good to be rigid in some areas. Like me, I've been sober for 17 years. I cannot use a mind altering substance. I'll wreck everything that I've built up over the course of 17 years. I can be rigid in that, right? Like I'm not going to sleep with any other women or put myself even in a close situation to be able to do that. I'm very rigid about that, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that. So there's some things where there's an intense rigid sort of thing. And then most things though need to have some flex and grace within it. And so I love that you mentioned that and even tap that into how to stay consistent, because that's so important. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it does kind of go back to my feelings around failure, because if you don't have grace, you are going to fail. You're going to fail. It's just, and then you're going to sit in that shame of failure. And it's just like, you're never going to be perfect. We're never going to be perfect 100% of the time. And so by allowing yourself that grace, it allows you to just, like you said, sort of be like, hey, it's okay that this was here and this was there and this is how you interacted in those ways. And you can still move forward, while still holding yourself accountable for things. But without that, I failed. And then, because the reality is you can't escape it. If, you are always going to, fall short if you're holding yourself to perfection.
because there seems to be a common thread interlinking everything that we've talked about today, and that would be your faith.
Yeah.
So let's talk about how faith has kind of maybe played a role in everything we've talked about, or I guess let me just say faith, and then I'll let you run with that as a thought and how that's
Yeah.
helped you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like me personally, I'm a Christian, and I believe that that means more than just somebody, showing up to church on holidays or every Sunday. It's core to who I am. And I think specifically in the athletics world, when you're looking at like what it means to be a Christian athlete, a big thing that comes into play is identity. It's very easy to have your identity be in your sport. And sport is so up and down. You can't control things like injuries. You can't control things like bad coaches. And so if your identity is in something that's so fallible and constantly moving, like that's going to be an emotional roller coaster for you. And so like throughout college, like I grew up Christian and, believing in God and going to church. But when I was in college was when I really, explored and questioned and challenged and made my faith my own, and really was going through a lot of those trying times that I talked about, and having to, you know, have something else solid and firm to hold on to. And a lot of times that was really what led me to develop like such a strong faith and relationship with God, is understanding that like in the end, like everything we're doing that we tend as humans to place value on this world is of this world. It's something that somebody made up
Yeah.
at some point and decided to place some sort of value on. But like we don't have to subscribe to that. We don't have to believe that, making the Olympics is everything. And, we don't have to believe that making six figures or, being able to like get married and have kids is everything that holds meaning in life, because like that isn't, perfection is not possible. And so we're always going to fail and fall short. And I think if you, yeah, it goes back to that idea again of like, if we expect perfection and hold ourselves to that, we're always going to miss the mark. And that's like core to faith as a Christian, is that understanding of like, we are imperfect humans who need salvation. We need grace. And that's what God gives us. And so I think it's like, it ties into like my faith ties into my outlook on life in a lot of ways too. And so, I mean, I think even now, like as I'm starting to rise up in track and field and trying to understand like what do I actually want out of this? Like what is the purpose of this? Because if the purpose of this is for me to go to the Olympics, what happens when I fall short of that? Like that's devastating. And so like, and it's possible. So there must be something deeper than just what the world has put forth as success in track and field. And like along with track and field, I've been able to also like really grow like my following on Instagram. And you can ask yourself the same question, like what's the point of growing a following on Instagram? What's the point of having this big audience? Some people might look at it and say money. Well, what's the point of money? What is money going to get me? It's all temporary. And so in the end, like I truly see my place and position in track and field right now as an opportunity to grow like the sort of just like the audience and podium that I have, the platform that I have, so that people can look at me and see the joy that drives my life and question why, and see that it's because of what I have from Jesus. Like 100%, that's what it is. And that's something that like, I like, if that is God working through me, I will not fail. Like that's something that I can't fail at, because it's not about me. It's about him. And so I think that that's like all of this is like what is that goal that I'm running for that like I can't fail at, and that's being used to bring glory to God and really show others the love and joy of Jesus. And so I mean I fall short of that plenty of times, and I check myself and I recognize, and I'm like, whoa, like if I get stuck in trying to do this for myself and my own success, it gets sad and it gets hard really, really quickly.
Hmm.
And so I can catch myself in that and be like, let me get back to the core of this. That's gratitude and showing up for other people in the way that I hold myself and my attitude and my love for others. And so I think that's like at the core of really all that I'm doing. And, if I can do that even in the bad seasons, like ultimately the results don't matter and I'm going to have success in what I'm doing.
Yeah. You can talk about from an athletic performance standpoint, the failures or not reaching the potential that you thought you had, or whatever, the levels of success that you thought you had. But you said something very important there. That's when your identity as a Christian, that's when your relationship with Christ actually came and solidified.
Yeah.
And if that was the turmoil you needed to go through, or that was the challenging time you needed to go through in order to surrender and fully embrace that identity with Christ, then that's a win, right?
Yeah.
Like that's massive, because that's really the win that matters, as you were talking about. So yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, that's it, Elena. That's it. That's all I got for you today.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. And I'm honored to have you on the Patina'd Podcast. And this was really fun. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And thank you so much for having
Yeah.
me. Like I love getting to share my story and stuff. And I mean, that's ultimately like all I'm trying to do is I'm like, how can I get it out more? Like, the way that God has worked in my life and the joy that I have, big smile that I have on my face all the time. Like I have a leg tattoo that has a verse from the song Firm Foundation it's like the second verse, and it says, I've still got joy in chaos. I've got peace that makes no sense. And that line just always hits so hard for me, because I think that's like the core of what, like who I am is, like, even in the chaos and stuff, you're like, why am I happy right now? Like my life is falling apart. Why am I at peace right now? Like the world is going crazy, and it's all like, it's at the core, like it's being able to hold on to Jesus. So it's cool whenever I can also connect, that part of my story with the athletic side with new communities. So thank you so much.
Yeah, that's great. And for people looking to connect with Elena, right now on your screen, it's showing under Elena, it's showing her Instagram account. So go ahead and find her on there, and be rooting for you to get to Paris and kill it in Paris. So
thanks so
great.
much, Kenny. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Patina'd Podcast. There are other shows that emphasize resilience, but my intent is to normalize personal development through embracing challenge by interviewing the common man and woman, the person that you and I can relate to. If you are someone who wants to soak up the insights of normal people doing extraordinary things, please subscribe. If you know somebody who is overwhelmed by fear and complacency, please share this podcast with them. I'm your host, Kenny Hill, and I run a private practice near Sacramento, California called Recovery Hill. My website is in the description tab, along with my social media links. The intro music was Two in the Back, performed by Sunday at Slim's on Blue Dot Sessions.